You are listening to the History on Film podcast. And now here are your hosts, Ross Lennon and Ryan Barr.
Hello, and welcome to another interview edition of the History on Film podcast. I'm your host, Ross Lennon. I'm joined, as always, by my close friend and colleague, Ryan Barr. How you doing, Ryan?
I'm crying, laughing, throwing up. It's all, I'm doing it all. It's
well,
great.
I'm going to give you the honor and privilege of introducing our special guest that we have today, because you really did so much in making this happen.
All right. Well, I'll have the honor of that. So our guest today is a public historian and author with a focus on military history of World War I and its portrayals in popular culture. He is also the current president of the International Society for the First World War Studies, an associate of the Imperial War Museum Institute, and the senior research fellow for the Center for Army Leadership, Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst. His latest book, The Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire, examines how the Galactic Empire of the Star Wars universe was able to rise from the ashes of the Clone Wars, rule with an iron fist, and the events that led to its ultimate demise. We are extremely honored today to have him join us. Please welcome to our show, Dr. Chris Kempshall.
Oh, thank you very much. Wow, DK really sent over like a bunch of stuff. That's almost like my entire CV. Don't I? Chris Kempshall's right-handed. Here's his blood type. It's good to be here. Thanks very much for having me.
We do like to keep detailed medical records on all of our guests, and we do send those. We send those to a lab on Genosis, but the less said about that, the better. One of my favorite parts of the book is the introduction, because you include so much of the place setting. It doubles as this clever tool for setting up the vantage point of your character, Beaumont. How did you decide what Beaumont knows and what he doesn't know?
I think that a lot of people have a misunderstanding about what historians are and what historians do. They kind of think they're somewhere between like an encyclopedia and a chronicler who just provide you with objective, unbiased facts. And that's, I don't need to tell you guys, that's not what historians are. That's not what historians do. Historians make arguments. Mm-hmm. So that introduction is also, pretty clear that Beaumont Kin is not just going to sit here and weigh up the good and bad side of the Galactic Empire. He has an argument that is going to exist as a thread throughout the entire book.
I always say we're not, we're not referees. We're not, just scorekeepers. It's more, and of course this is going to make us sound so much cooler than we are. It's like we're kind of a mix between like lawyers and detectives, where it's like we're building a case and then we have to argue it. So it's like we're Perry Mason and Columbo, sort of all wrapped in one.
Yeah, we'll kick your door in and flash our library card at you.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we do your font rights.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, it was important to kind of set up, Beaumont Kin is an active part of the book because historians are an active part of their work. They exist to make arguments, and historians make arguments in book form. But you're right in that, Beaumont Kin has, a significant disadvantage to me in that Beaumont Kin hasn't watched Star Wars. To the extent that it feels a little bit like I'm cheating, that, I know a bunch of stuff that Beaumont Kin doesn't know. So we had to construct a reality around Beaumont Kin, drawing on my experience of doing archival research and going to libraries and, interacting with the stuff that survives to then map that onto the Empire to try and kind of figure out, okay, what stuff would plausibly survive to allow Beaumont Kin to either reference it or read it or know it in some way, shape or form. We've all watched Andor now. We've watched Cyril Khan sit in his little nightmare cube in the Bureau of Standards on Coruscant producing paperwork, because the Empire is exactly the type of state and institution that produces paperwork. No one's reading it. No one's sitting down and reading those reports, but you're going to fill archives with that stuff. So in that sense, that became a useful, okay, we can use archival documents and the like, but there's going to be stuff in here that Beaumont Kin is never going to be able to read. No one is taking the minutes of meetings between Darth Vader and Emperor. That's a role like the drama in Spinal Tap. That guy dies a lot, and you're always advertising for a new one. So that type of stuff is never going to make it. It's never going to make it 30 years into the future so that Beaumont Kin can pull it out of an archive. So sometimes we leave those gaps, and Beaumont Kin makes an educated best guess, and sometimes he's right and sometimes he's wrong. because he hasn't watched Star Wars and he doesn't know what actually happened. And what we always wanted in those situations was both for the times that he's right and for the times that he's wrong, for the audience, all of us in the real world who've watched Star Wars, to look at it and go, okay, Beaumont Kin is wrong here, but if I only had access to the stuff that Beaumont Kin had access to, maybe I'd make a similar conclusion, despite the fact that I know it to be wrong. Or if Beaumont Kin's right, to go, well, that's a really weird way to come around to the conclusion that's actually the correct one. I'm not sure if it's the most kind of easy route to navigate to this point, but again, given the things that Beaumont Kin clearly has, and the stuff he has, he puts it in the footnotes. Maybe I would eventually get to that kind of conclusion. So it was about Beaumont Kin never knowing everything. I didn't want that. I didn't want to have an omniscient, because it's not realistic, because we're not omniscient when we do history in our own world. But for the way that there were particular points in the book, the Battle of Hoth chapter, the Battle of Endor chapter, that Beaumont Kin lays out competing evidence to try and figure out what he thinks is happening. And it's fine if at the end of reading those chapters, the audience, both in Beaumont Kin's universe and in ours, goes, I don't agree, I don't buy it, because that's no different to reading a normal history book. Somebody has explained their way through the evidence and they've drawn their conclusion. It's fine to disagree with them, but it's important to show that some of it is just based on the stuff that you can make use of. It's whatever you've got. Future studies of the Empire are probably going to be required, maybe even dedicated ones into, areas that I only gave a chapter to or exist as a section in the Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire might actually benefit from being the entire focus of other studies in time. I mean, the benefit of archival droids can't be overestimated, who can actually search through some of this stuff and have an awareness of some of this stuff much quicker than, I as a human can do. They can crunch reports and crunch data far quicker. But I have no doubt that there's other weird and wonderful stuff hidden away in these reports that don't appear to have ever been read necessarily by anybody. They're just logged and recorded and archived away and spread across the galaxy.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense, because you think about, just like I said, look at the ISB alone probably produces how many reports daily, and that's just one agency, one apparatus of the Empire. Then you have the Army, the Navy, the Inquisitorius, all these other, did the Inquisitors ever do reports? We don't know.
We don't know,
maybe.
And we know so little about the Inquisitors now, except for the fact that they existed and then were gone.
Right. They were around active for a couple of years and then gone. You also have, all of the transition from using clones to using both conscripted and volunteer forces, right? That transition period, and then there was the destruction of Camino, which probably all of that information about the final stages of the cloning program lost. I just think about continually, and we're just talking about during the end of the Republic, Empire Galactic Civil War era. I can only imagine if you go back even further, like planets like Malachor that were we don't even know what happened there, but Malachor was completely obliterated, right?
Yeah.
What information there was obviously some kind of conflict there. What information was lost? I think of Dr. Afra. She's always discovering new civilizations we didn't, artifacts from civilizations that the greater galactic public didn't even know existed because they weren't around long enough to have an impact outside of their sector, right?
Yeah, when she's not bringing the field into disrepute.
Yeah, we won't get into her and her reputation, but I'm just thinking from a pure archaeological standpoint.
Yeah.
She does shed light on things from the very, very far past that we don't.
Yeah.
We're talking about the very, very recent history in terms of the entire historical timeline of the galactic, of the galaxy.
And you mentioned Camino in there, where there appears to be enough evidence to suggest that at one point that planet was erased from the Jedi archives.
Right.
Which, what other planets have been erased from our collective archives? Are out there. People are living there. They have their own stuff and their own history. But the galaxy is a big place. You can lose a planet in it pretty easily.
Right. And that's a whole other issue. I mean, Emperor Palpatine built his palace. The Imperial Palace was, basically the Jedi Temple that was refitted. I have to imagine what did Palpatine have destroyed of the Jedi that we lost, let alone what the Jedi historically, they
destroyed of the Sith.
Destroyed of the Sith, but also I'm thinking of, you have the original Jedi Temple in Ahch-To, and then there's temples on Ossus, and for the history of the Jedi before their ultimate destruction with Order 66 and the Purge, they also moved their temple around a lot before they finally settled in Coruscant, right?
Yeah.
So what kind of knowledge was lost when you're trying to move a religious order's headquarters from one place to another? Something has to be left behind. I mean, there's not, I mean, I can't move from one house to another without forgetting something or losing something, right? I can't imagine put that on a scale of a religious order or a military or anything that is going to be big and complicated and bureaucratically choked as these organizations are.
It's why the field of history is a field that's always in motion. The study of history is an ongoing thing. We may find out something new tomorrow or next week or next month or next year, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't undertake the action now simply because I might know more, son, and that'll make for a better study. That actually, it's important to do the studies now and then improve or revise them or kind of redo them at some point in the future when we discover the things that we don't know.
That's why some of the best history books stay in print and get second, third, fourth, and fifth editions.
You just heard a clip from the most recent episode of the History on Film podcast. For more of this episode and access to all our episodes, search for the History on Film podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Pandora. Don't forget to like and subscribe the channel here on YouTube. You can also check out our Discord server, follow us on Blue Sky and Instagram, and please consider supporting us on Patreon. Links in the description. Thanks for listening.